And the last question, how do you perceive the bill that was passed in Washington to prop up our economy?
Well, my perception is, from the beginning, I had a hard time believing that we were being told the straight truth. I had a hard time believing that nobody saw this coming, and I knew for a fact that our current representative voted for the deregulation that got us into this mess in the first place. Consistently, whether it was under the Clinton administration or under the Bush administration. Most of it happened under the Bush administration. And I believe that our current representative pretty much does what the Bush administration wants him to do. And I'll give you an example of that. This week, without questioning the legislation, without being out there publicly and demanding more answers from private business folks who supposedly knew what they were doing when they structured these loans, it was basically a rubber stamp for this decision. $700 billion. Still doesn't feel good coming out of my mouth. $700 billion that we don't have answers for. And there's a couple of things with this piece of legislation. Not only is it a huge number, but it's also dollars going right out into the market. Dollars that, where are they coming from? Are we borrowing it? Do we know? How's that going to affect the value of the dollar? And it's another $1 trillion at the end of the day onto our, now we're at $10 trillion in the last 8 years. And this is supposedly a fiscal conservative that we're talking about. I come from a small rural county. It was close to bankruptcy when I took office, and now we're solvent. And we've saved a hospital, and we're updating our general plan, and we're expanding high-speed internet throughout the county, and yet we've got somebody who's been in Congress for 22 years. I was 18 when he was elected, 18. He was off to Brazil. And he doesn't ask the question. And I think we need to ask ourselves why he didn't ask the question. There are other mechanisms out there that could have helped with this. There were solutions that were put in place in the 1930s during that crash, where the federal government just basically said, you know what, we'll back up. If you really get in trouble, we'll back you up. This is a check. Thankfully, between early this week and late this week, there are some more protections that have been put in place. But I still think that it is a horrific piece of legislation. The other thing with this is that in order to get people to vote for it, and understand that my opponent voted for it the first time also, there were a bunch of bells and whistles added to it, and I'll put that in my ending comments.
Thank you. You have 5 minutes to close out.
As I was saying, I love timing. Basically, there was a lot added to this piece of legislation. Some more restrictions and some more controls, thank God. But there were also bells and whistles added to it that basically blackmailed people into voting for it. You take the good with the bad. One of those bells and whistles was a Secure Rural Schools bill, which is going to return money to rural counties and roads that we desperately need. Siskiyou County, Trinity County, Butte, Shasta. Most of the counties in this district will benefit from that. The only thing is that our current representative can't claim that he voted for it because that was in there, because he voted for it the first time. So his vote is not based on our communities. His vote is based on who's writing the check. His vote is based on Wall Street. His vote is based on insurance companies. His vote is not based on Northern California. It's not based on families. It's not based on educating our children. It's not based on health care. It is not based on helping our communities. We need somebody who's going to represent us up here. I'm so tired of being visited on a continual basis by somebody that doesn't really understand our communities, doesn't represent us, comes to our communities and talks about privatizing Social Security and then says he's doing us a favor, comes to our communities and says, you know what? I'm not answering that question. I'm not answering that question. I'm not answering that question. Someone who resorts to telephone town hall meetings and thinks that he's really touching people that way. Is that who we want? Is that somebody who really understands us? Is that somebody who is really going to get the job done when the rubber meets the road and the big decisions like this week come down the pike? Is that somebody who's going to stand up and question his party? I mean, there was bipartisan opposition to this thing, appropriately. And that's our communities. We're bipartisan, like it or not. When there's a fire next door, you're going to be out there with a hose helping your neighbor. We need somebody in Congress who's going to help us, help our neighbors, and have the best interests of our communities at heart. We need someone in Congress who's going to let us take the washing machine home and then make sure to follow up with us. I thank you for